Hello. I want to talk about origins of consciousness. So, is consciousness in the brain like most materialists would have you believe? In other words, is consciousness something created by matter? Or is consciousness something that comes before matter? Is consciousness the originator of matter? This is the principal polarizing argument between East philosophy and West philosophy. The Western world is materialist. The Eastern world is consciousness oriented. To this day, neither has been unequivocally proven. And there's even a third option, which is maybe that neither consciousness exists, nor does matter exist without the other. So only when both come together do they spontaneously create each other. Now this is an interesting idea because it's so paradoxical and twisted and unfathomable in a way that it almost feels like it has to be true. Because life just feels that way, right? Life feels unexplainable. And so, in science they say always, like, the simplest explanation is often the correct explanation. And so, what is the simplest explanation here for why nothing's explainable? Why everything's so mysterious? Well, the simplest explanation would be that everything, life itself, matter, consciousness, are formed in the most paradoxical way possible. They're formed from each other, which is beyond understanding in a way. Right? Because the forming of each other, it almost has you going in, perhaps this is where the word strange loop comes from, where you say, well, where is the brain formed? The brain is formed from the consciousness. Where's the consciousness formed? Consciousness is formed from the brain. Where's the brain formed? The brain's formed from the consciousness. Consciousness formed. Consciousness formed from the brain. You go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And what is that? That's an oscillation. And what do we know about the entire universe? The entire universe is just varying complexities of oscillation. And so, how do you get infinite energy? You get infinite energy when one thing that's fundamentally not the other thing forms the other thing. And the other thing that's fundamentally not the one thing forms the one thing. That's infinite energy. That's creation. That's movement. That's motion. That's energy cannot be created or destroyed. Because perhaps these things are eternal. When they create each other, they cannot be destroyed. For there's nothing outside of them to destroy them. They fuel each other infinitely. It's an infinite energy machine. And I think this is kind of where the idea of yin-yang comes from, right? One creates the other. Another interesting idea is that you could think of the brain as like this antenna, like a receiver that receives consciousness from another dimension. So you could almost think of consciousness as like it exists in this dimension that is so far out, that's so beyond our comprehension. But it's like this dimension of all possibilities, right? It's like infinite potential dimension. That's where consciousness comes from. And then it gets received by our brains. And then from there, it goes from the infinite possibilities that it is to a much smaller amount of infinite possibilities. Still infinite. Living a life, you have infinite choices. But you are in this body. You are somewhat in this mind. And so the level of infinity has been reduced. So perhaps it works like that. Personally, I think that if somehow this they form each other thing is wrong, then I would have to guess that consciousness forms matter. That would be my guess. My second guess. Because it would be very obvious. It would be very obvious why that can't be proven. Why that can't be proven. Because consciousness in and of itself is something mysterious. It is like a void. It is the observer. It's not matter. It's not defined by any characteristics. It's infinite. It's infinite potential. And so there's nothing you can grapple onto with consciousness. And it's at the heart of you. It's at the heart of the observer themselves. So if you're trying to do science on yourself, it's like you're never going to quite get to the truth. Because, of course, the truth is you observing everything you're trying to do to get to yourself. So that's why, if that's the case, why it hasn't been proven and why it probably will never be proven that consciousness is the absolute originator of all things, including matter. The argument, personally, I feel that the argument for matter creating consciousness, that's a much tougher argument to make. That strictly they don't create each other, and consciousness does not create matter, but matter creates consciousness. That's also unprovable, I think, because think about it, like the origin of the universe, if we really go with the Big Bang Theory-ish kind of route, where matter existed before consciousness existed, and, you know, yada yada yada, all this stuff happened, cause and effect, that eventually led to the creation of consciousness in matter somehow, or in the interaction that happens between different parts of matter. You couldn't really prove that, right? Because you weren't around for that creation. You weren't there observing it. And, you know, the universe is so complex that we'll never have the math to unequivocally prove this kind of thing. Consciousness is just one of those things that's like, it just escapes all form of logic. It's beyond logic. It's post-rational. It's beyond rational. You know, I think a lot of people, they think, oh, you're crazy. Like, craziness, that's bad, you know? Like, if you're crazy, it means you're less than rational, you know? Like, there's something wrong with you. But I think that, you know, the true origins of crazy, where craziness really comes from, it's it comes from a place that's actually above rationality. Like, craziness contains rationality, not the other way around, in my opinion. But again, this is because I'm more consciousness-based than matter-based in my views. I do not think that logic can contain all irrationality. In fact, I think you could probably prove that if you really wanted to. How could irrationality be within, like, imagine this in set theory or category theory, set theory, whatever. How could you put irrationality inside the box or the set of rationality? Try to do that. Irrationality is infinitely more complex, more infinite, bigger. It's bigger than rationality could ever be. That's my intuition. All right, I think that's enough. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.